How do I know when it's time to get rid of a Turo car? And what happens whenever I know that I want to get rid of one of these cars? This is a topic that I get asked about quite frequently, and recently I was sent a message by somebody requesting me to make a video about this topic. And surprisingly enough, I realized that I have never talked about this before. So that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. But I do want to remind you guys that we are currently running our final sale of the season for the Car Sharing Masterclass. If you use the code NEWYEAR2024, you can get $150 off that purchase. The Car Sharing Masterclass goes over everything you need to know about starting and scaling a car sharing fleet with the same business model I use, and this will be our last sale until Black Friday. So November of 2024, which is 11 months from now. Again, if you want to check it out, you can use the code NEWYEAR2024 and you can check out the course in the link in the description below. So on to attrition and vehicle turnover. I get asked quite often if there is a specific year or mileage cap that I have for my cars, where once they meet that year or mileage, I automatically go ahead and sell that car. And truthfully, with my fleet, there really isn't. There isn't any set of guidelines or rules that I follow to dictate when I sell a car and what condition the car is at the point of selling. The oldest car in my fleet is a 2007. In fact, I have multiple 2007 cars in my fleet. And the highest mileage car in my fleet has over 250,000 miles. I don't like to gauge whether or not I should get rid of a car based on mileage or year alone, because these factors are going to be different from car to car. And my belief is if a car is getting rented out and it's not having issues, why get rid of it? My 2007 Ford Focus is much more reliable than my 2015 Kia Rio or my 2011 Honda Civic. And my 2009 Mercedes is my best performing car in my fleet, despite the fact that it's one of my older cars. And so while many hosts do have mileage or year requirements for the vehicles that they do have in their fleet, I don't. Instead, I like to base the cars that I keep or sell in my fleet off of utilization, customer reviews, and overall repairs and maintenance costs. Is the car still getting rented? When the car does get rented, are the guests saying good or bad things about the car? Is the car costing too much in repairs and maintenance? These are the three biggest questions that myself and my husband HP are constantly asking ourselves with our fleet, especially whenever the cars in our fleet get older. And they are ultimately the questions that dictate whether we keep a car or if we get rid of one. For example, if we notice that a car just isn't getting rented out, we will ultimately sell it, though this scenario is extremely rare in our fleet. This happened with our 2013 Lexus ES350. We had this car for a very short period of time, but we realized very quickly into owning this car that we paid too much for it. And based on how much we paid, this car would not be rented out enough, and thus it wouldn't make enough to justify keeping it. Utilization in general isn't really an issue in our fleet. In the case of this Lexus, it really was more of an issue of paying too much for it, and we didn't want to keep a car that was underperforming in relation to its cost, so we wanted to offload the car and use the money to buy more cars that would be rented more often, make a higher ROI because of a lower purchase price. So in the case of the Lexus, I certainly don't think that this was a utilization issue alone. It was more so an issue with the price that we bought the car at, how often the car was being rented in relation to that price, and how much it was making in a daily rate. This was kind of an all-encompassing issue. It wasn't due to utilization alone, but nevertheless, we ended up selling the car because we wanted to use the money to buy other cars that would make a higher ROI. But a much more common issue in our fleet is the questions of, is this car getting good or bad reviews from guests? And how much is this car costing to maintain or repair? And whenever we do end up getting rid of a car, these are oftentimes the issues that are behind the reason why we've made that decision. Reviews and customer perceptions of your vehicle is so incredibly important with the Turo fleet. You need to make sure to maintain a high review standard with your fleet. And if you notice that you have one car in your fleet that is getting bad reviews, that could very well be a reason to get rid of that car. But truthfully, this is sort of a last resort scenario, and there are a lot of precautionary steps that you can take prior to actually pulling the trigger and selling a car. And there are a lot of things that you can do to prevent bad reviews in the first place. For example, my 2007 Ford Focus. This car is high mileage, old, it's not a looker, but it gets rented out great and gets good reviews. This is in large part due to the fact that we let guests know at the point of booking exactly what they're booking. We tell them the car is old and high mileage. We have photos showing off the condition and wear and tear of the car. That way, when the car does get rented, the guest isn't surprised once they get to the vehicle. The other thing is this car is dirt cheap, and there's definitely a perception and expectation that comes along with that. If we had this car priced at, say, $40 per day, not only would this car not get rented out, but there would be a higher expectation associated with that car as well. There would be a lot less leniency whenever guests go to the vehicle and find that the paint is a bit worn out and the interior has some wear and tear. But because we not only set the expectation for the guests in advance, but the car is also extremely cheap, guests are extremely understanding that the car is older, higher mileage, and does have wear and tear. And as a result, despite the fact that this car isn't the best car on the road, it gets really great reviews. I have found that transparency is one of the best ways to get good reviews with your vehicles. And if you find that you have guests that are continuously unhappy with one of your cars, I would figure out exactly why they're unhappy, and I would be more transparent with that issue in your vehicle listing. For example, if you have an older car and guests are complaining because the car is a little bit louder on the road, you should say in your vehicle listing, hey, please be aware this car is a little bit older and as a result may not be as comfortable as newer 2024 models. Not only that, but if there is an issue that you've warned a guest about in your vehicle listing, and the guest then leaves you a bad review based off of that issue, you can actually get that review removed. And so what I'm saying here is that while selling a car is definitely something you should consider, if one of your vehicles is continuously getting bad reviews, it should ultimately be your last resort. And instead, you should look at number 1, addressing why the car is getting bad reviews, and then number 2, try to be more transparent about those issues that may be arising during rentals. Of course, if this is a mechanical issue, then everything I've just said isn't applicable to the situation, but if it has to do with some wear and tear, with some features given the fact that a car is older, this is stuff that you can absolutely be transparent about, and I am willing to bet that it will improve your overall reviews and ratings for that vehicle. Transparency is a great way to mitigate problems, but if you find that even with transparency, you're still getting bad reviews, then maybe that's an indicator that it's just simply time to sell that vehicle altogether. For example, years ago, we had a Ford Fusion that was a great Turo car. We owned it for a number of years, and towards the end of its time on Turo, we were running into so many issues with this vehicle. We would get a guest complaint about one issue, we would address that issue, and then a couple of weeks later, a different issue would pop up. Then we would fix that issue, and a month after that, another issue would pop up. It was constant for a number of months, and after about 3 or 4 months of this, we ended up just selling the car and getting rid of it. The negative reviews that this car was getting was dragging down our profile as a whole, and it just simply wasn't worth it, so we got rid of it. We ended up selling the car on Facebook Marketplace, and we actually sold it for a little bit more than what we initially bought it for. We sold our Ford Fusion because it was getting poor reviews, but we were on the cusp of selling it anyways because it was costing too much in repairs and maintenance. Because at the end of the day, maintenance and repair costs is an absolutely valid reason to get rid of a car. In fact, currently as I record this, we're considering getting rid of our 2011 Honda Civic because of this exact reason. Our 2011 Honda Civic gets good reviews because fortunately many of the issues we've had haven't happened on trips, but this car has been an absolute headache. Last year, the car had a PCM issue. We ended up diagnosing that issue and got it repaired, which was not only extremely costly, but it took forever as well. We then sent it out on a number of rentals, and then it ended up having a completely unrelated issue that again took a long time to diagnose, and it was extremely expensive. And then in the last couple of weeks, right before the Christmas holiday, the PCM had another issue. We've ultimately decided with this Honda Civic that we're going to try out one more repair because we've essentially narrowed down the issues to one singular thing. We're going to try to make that repair, and if the repair doesn't work, we're just going to end up cutting our losses and moving on and selling this Honda Civic. But this Honda Civic is a perfect example of a car that's probably worth selling. In our entire Turo career, we've only sold 3 cars due to maintenance and repairs issues, and 2 of the 3 were actually sold prior to me even starting this YouTube channel. We had a 2009 Kia and a 2009 Hyundai Accent that we sold for maintenance problems. These were both purchased years ago, pre-pandemic, and quite early on in our Turo career. And then the Ford Fusion is the third, which is the one that I mentioned earlier. We also did get rid of our 2007 Lexus ES350 that was listed on GetAround. We got rid of this car because we left to GetAround. And we sold our 2013 Lexus ES350 because, as I mentioned earlier, we overpaid for it and it wasn't performing as well as I had hoped. We also sold my Jeep Wrangler back in 2021, which wasn't for anything specific, but just was because it had run its course. All other cars in our fleet that we've gotten rid of are cars that we only got rid of because they were totaled. And truthfully, this is a large part of our attrition plan. Keep cars until they get totaled. When cars get totaled out, it obviously forces us to get rid of the car because obviously once a vehicle is totaled, it can't be rented, and so that's what we do. When we buy a car, we plan to keep it until it gets totaled. We typically don't buy a car with a plan to sell it at any specific time. So the act of cars getting totaled ultimately has forced us to keep our fleet relatively fresh because there's only a few cars that we've had for more than a few years. Now, it's important to recognize that our attrition plan really in large part is because of the cars that we rent out. We rent out cheap, economical cars to people who are looking to rent a car on a budget, and for this reason, people don't really care that our cars are a bit older and maybe higher mileage. But if we were, for example, renting out luxury cars, our attrition plan would be completely different and we would have to sell cars after a few years of owning them, if not sooner. So the type of car that you have will ultimately dictate the methodology that you use in order to navigate this process. But for us, as of now with the cars that we have, we keep vehicles until it no longer makes sense to keep them. And maybe because a car is getting too costly with repairs, maybe it's because a car is getting poor reviews, or maybe it's because the car just isn't getting rented enough. But ultimately, those are really the 3 questions that dictate whether we should keep or sell a car that's in our Turo fleet. And if we don't end up selling a vehicle, we just wait until it gets totaled. Like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.